Hey guys, tonight we dive into the sprawling, windswept world of the Mongol Empire, place so vast that it would make even the most ambitious road trip planner weep quietly into their travel journal. Imagine yourself standing on the endless steppe, the horizon stretching in every direction like a green ocean, where the only constant is the rhythm of hooves pounding the earth. You're about to explore how this enormous empire managed to keep its far flung corners connected long before the internet or even the postal stamp. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this ride without a few micro naps and a serious appreciation for horse stamina. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? It's always fun to see where in the world we're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself at the edge of one of history's largest empires, the Mongol Empire, which at its peak stretched from the Pacific Ocean all the way to Eastern Europe. This wasn't just a landmass, it was a living, breathing entity that demanded communication and coordination on an unprecedented scale. To govern such a vast territory, the Mongols needed a way to send messages quickly, reliably, and across thousands of miles of rugged terrain. Enter the Yam system. It was the Empire's answer to the age-old problem of Distensen early postal network that combined mounted riders, relay stations, and a strict code of operation. The Yam wasn't just a mail service, it was the Empire's nervous system, pulsing with information that kept armies marching, orders flowing, and intelligence gathering. Historians still argue whether the Yam was inspired by earlier postal systems like those of the Persians, or if it was a uniquely Mongol innovation born from necessity. What's clear is that the scale and efficiency of the Yam were unlike anything the world had seen before. You can almost hear the thunder of hooves as riders leapfrog across the steppe, each one passing the baton to the next in a seamless chain. Picture the vastness of the Mongol Empire as a giant clockwork mechanism, with the Yam as the gears that ensured every part moved in sync. Without it, the empire might have fractured under its own weight long before it reached its historic expanse. And here's a quirky tidbit to chew on. Some accounts suggest that the Mongols used a form of pony express, so efficient that messages could travel over 200 miles in a single dayan. Astonishing feat when you consider the terrain and technology of the time. Of course, whether this was consistently achievable or more of a legendary boast is still up for debate among scholars. So, as you settle into this vast world of riders and relay stations, remember, you're not just hearing a story about horses and messages, you're stepping into the pulse of an empire that changed the course of history by mastering the art of speed and endurance. You barely have time to catch your breath before you're swept into the origins of the Yam system itself, a marvel of organization that Genghis Khan didn't just stumble upon, but deliberately crafted. Imagine him, the fierce and visionary leader, not only conquering lands, but also plotting how to keep those lands connected. The Yam was his brainchild, a relay network of mounted riders and strategically placed stations that turned the vast Mongol steppe into a living, breathing communication web. This system wasn't some haphazard arrangement, it was a carefully engineered solution born out of necessity. When you consider the sheer size of the empire, stretching thousands of miles, it's almost mind-boggling to think how messages could travel so fast without modern technology. The Yam's genius lay in its relay nature. Riders didn't have to cover the entire distance themselves. Instead, they passed messages from one to another at relay stations, each fresh horse and rider ready to sprint off without delay. Historians still argue whether the Yam was entirely original or heavily influenced by the postal systems of conquered peoples, such as the Uyghurs or the Khitans. But what's undeniable is the scale and efficiency that Genghis Khan's empire achieved. The Yam quickly became a backbone of Mongol administration, military coordination, and intelligence gathering. Here's a quirky detail to keep you smiling. Some stations reportedly had bells or drums to signal the arrival of a rider, creating a sort of ancient "you've got mail" alert that echoed across the steppes. It's almost charming to imagine a Mongol postal worker pounding a drum to announce a courier's arrival, like a medieval version of a notification ping. The Yam's network was vast, with stations spaced roughly every 25 to 30 miles a distance that allowed a rider to sprint at full gallop before handing off the message. These stations weren't just pit stops. They were well stocked with fresh horses, food, and shelter, enabling the riders to maintain an astonishing pace. So, as you picture this relay system humming across the empire, remember that it was more than just a mail service. It was a strategic lifeline that helped hold together one of the largest empires in human history. Without the Yam, the Mongol conquests might have been little more than scattered raids rather than a unified force that reshaped Eurasia. You're now stepping into the dusty boots of the Mongol postal riders themselves, those hardy souls who carried the empire's lifeblood across endless miles of unforgiving terrain. These riders weren't just anyone plucked off the street. They were elite, rigorously selected, and trained to endure conditions that would make most modern endurance athletes reconsider their life choices. Imagine the recruitment process. Young men, often from nomadic backgrounds, already skilled horsemen, were chosen for their stamina, courage, and ability to withstand the brutal Mongolian climate. The training wasn't just about riding fast. It was about mastering survival, navigating through blizzards, scorching sun, and hostile territories, while maintaining the speed and secrecy of their mission. Historians still argue whether riders were assigned to fixed routes, or if they rotated through different legs of the Yam. But what's clear is that their physical and mental toughness was legendary. These riders had to be able to push their horses to the limit, then switch mounts at relay stations without missing a beat. Their lives depended on speed, precision, and an almost superhuman ability to sleep in short bursts. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly developed the skill to take micro naps while still on horseback, dozing lightly without losing control of their mounts. It's a bit like trying to nap on a roller coaster only, with more dust and fewer safety harnesses. This ability to sleep in the saddle was crucial because stopping for long rest periods could mean delays that might cost lives or the fate of entire campaigns. The riders also carried a paisar, kind of metal tablet that granted them authority and access to resources. This badge of office was respected and feared, allowing riders to commandeer horses, food, and shelter at stations along the route. Without it, their journey would have been far more perilous. So, as you imagine yourself as one of these riders, remember that you're not just a courier, you're a vital link in a chain that spans continents. Your endurance, skill, and sheer grit keep the Empire's heart beating, even as the steppe stretches endlessly before you. You glide into the world of the Yam's relay stations, those humble yet ingenious pit stops scattered across the vast Mongol steppe like life buoys in an ocean of grass. These stations weren't grand palaces or bustling towns. They were simple, functional outposts designed with one purpose: to keep the riders moving without pause. Picture a cluster of yurts or wooden huts, surrounded by corrals filled with fresh horses, all ready to bolt at a moment's notice. Each station was stocked with food, water, and basic supplies, not just for the riders, but for their mounts, who needed to be rested and fed to maintain the relentless pace. The design was minimal but effective: a place to swap tired horses, grab a quick bite, and maybe catch a few precious minutes of rest before galloping off into the horizon again. Historians still argue about the exact number and spacing of these stations, but most agree they were roughly 25 to 30 miles apart, close enough for a horse to sprint at full speed without exhaustion, yet far enough to cover serious ground quickly. The stations were often guarded and maintained by local officials or appointed caretakers, ensuring that riders never faced delays due to missing horses or supplies. Here's a quirky detail to imagine. Some stations reportedly had bells or drums to announce the arrival of a rider, creating an ancient "you've got mail" alert that echoed across the steppe. It's almost charming to think of a rider arriving to the rhythmic pounding of drums, signalling that the Empire's news had just arrived. The relay stations also played a critical role in the security of the network. They acted as checkpoints where riders could exchange sensitive information, rest briefly, and receive updates on weather or enemy movements. This system of stations created a chain of trust and efficiency that was vital for the Empire's cohesion. So, as you picture these relay stations dotted across the endless steppe, remember they were the unsung heroes of the Yam, system quiet, sturdy, and indispensable. Without them, the riders would be forced to cover impossible distances without rest, and the Empire's communication would falter like a broken drumbeat. You're now galloping across the endless Mongolian steppe, the grass swaying like a sea beneath your horse's hooves. The horizon stretches infinitely, a vast canvas of green and blue, broken only by distant hills or the occasional cluster of trees. The wind rushes past your face, carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers, but also the biting chill of early morning or the scorching heat of midday sun. This is the rider's world, a place where time bends to the rhythm of hooves and the urgency of the Empire's messages. Riding through the steppe isn't just about speed, it's about endurance, navigation, and an intimate bond with your horse. The terrain varies from flat plains to rolling hills, sometimes interrupted by rivers or patches of forest. You learn to read the land, spotting landmarks, and choosing the best paths to avoid obstacles or ambushes. The open steppe offers little shelter, so you're exposed to the elements: rain, wind, dust storms, and blistering sun, all of which test your resolve. Historians still argue whether riders maintained a steady gallop for the entire journey, or alternated between fast bursts and slower trots to conserve energy. Either way, the pace was relentless. The Mongol horses, small but incredibly hardy, could sustain impressive speeds and recover quickly, but the riders' skill in managing their mount's stamina was crucial. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly used a technique called posting, where they would rise slightly out of the saddle in rhythm with the horse's gait, reducing fatigue for both themselves and the animal. It's a bit like bouncing gently on a pogo stick, only with a lot more dust and fewer safety nets. The vastness of the steppe also meant that riders often travelled alone, relying on their instincts and training to navigate and survive. This solitude could be both a blessing and a curse, peaceful in its own way, but also lonely and mentally taxing. The rider's mind had to stay sharp, alert for signs of danger or changes in weather, while also managing the physical toll of hours in the saddle. As you ride, you become part of a centuries-old tradition of Mongol horseman masters of endurance and speed, whose lives were intertwined with the rhythm of the steppe. Your journey is not just a delivery, it's a testament to human and equine resilience, a moving thread in the vast tapestry of the empire. You're halfway through a grueling ride, and exhaustion is creeping in like a slow fog. Yet, there's no time to stop. The message must reach its destination. So how do you, a Mongol postal rider, manage to sleep while still hurtling across the steppe? The answer lies in a remarkable skill: sleeping in the saddle. Imagine balancing on a moving horse, the landscape blurring past, while your body desperately craves rest. Riders mastered micro naps, brief moments of dozing that could last mere seconds to a few minutes without losing control of their mount. This wasn't just a party trick, it was a survival technique born from necessity. The ability to rest while moving meant the Yam system could maintain its astonishing speed, sometimes covering over 200 miles in a day. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or limited to only the most experienced riders, but the accounts that survive paint a picture of riders who could enter a light sleep phase while maintaining balance and awareness. It's like the ultimate multitasking challenges sleep and vigilance rolled into one. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly used a simple leather strap or loop to secure themselves lightly to the saddle, preventing falls during these micronaps. It's a bit like a seatbelt for the steppe, though probably less comfortable and definitely less crash-tested. The physical toll of such sleep deprivation was immense. Riders had to fight off fatigue, muscle cramps, and mental lapses, all while navigating treacherous terrain. The horses, too, played their part, trained to maintain steady gaits and respond to subtle cues even when their riders were momentarily half asleep. Your senses sharpen despite the exhaustion, the wind's chill against your skin, the rhythmic thudding of hooves, the faint scent of distant smoke or wild herbs. These sensory anchors kept you tethered to reality, preventing you from slipping too deeply into unconsciousness. So, as you imagine yourself dozing lightly on horseback, remember that this skill was more than a quirky survival hack. It was a vital element in the Mongol Empire's communication lifeline, a testament to human adaptability and the extraordinary demands of life on the steppe. You're now curious about how messages actually travelled beyond just the speed of horses and endurance of riders. The Mongol postal system wasn't simply a matter of galloping across the steppe. It was a complex web of communication methods designed to keep information flowing smoothly and securely. As you ride, you notice the subtle signals and codes that help the system function like clockwork. Flags, banners, and smoke signals were part of the visual language used to convey messages quickly across distances when riders were out of earshot. These signals could warn of approaching enemies, indicate the status of a route, or call for reinforcements. The use of such methods added a layer of efficiency and security, allowing the empire to react swiftly to changing circumstances. Historians still argue about the extent to which written messages were standardized, or if riders relied more heavily on oral communication and memorization. Some suggest that the Mongols used a form of script adapted from the Uyghur alphabet, while others believe that many messages were delivered verbally, relying on the rider's remarkable memory skills. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly carried small wooden tablets or scrolls tied securely to their saddles, which could be quickly unrolled to reveal the message. It's like the ancient equivalent of pulling out your phone to check a text, except with a lot more dust and horsehair. The system also relied heavily on the paisa, a metal tablet that granted riders authority and access to resources. This wasn't just a fancy badge, it was a symbol that commanded respect and ensured cooperation from locals and officials along the route. Without the paisa, a rider's journey could be delayed or even blocked. As you imagine yourself navigating this intricate communication network, you realize that the Mongol postal system was more than just a courier service. It was a sophisticated information highway, blending speed, security, and adaptability to keep the empire's vast territories connected. You clutch the paisa tightly, that small but mighty metal tablet that's your ticket to authority across the Mongol Empire. This isn't just a fancy trinket, it's your official pass, your VIP badge, your get-out-of-trouble-free card rolled into one. With it in hand, you command respect and resources wherever you go: horses, food, shelter, and even protection from local officials or bandits. The paisa was carefully crafted, often made of precious metals like silver or gold, and engraved with the Empire's seal. It served as a tangible symbol of the rider's official status, granting them the right to requisition supplies and assistance without question. Without this tablet, your journey would be a lot more complicated. Imagine trying to borrow a fresh horse or get a meal from suspicious villagers without any proof of your mission. Historians still argue about the exact privileges the paisa conferred and whether its misuse contributed to corruption within the empire. Some records suggest that paisas were sometimes forged or abused by officials, leading to tensions and inefficiencies. But for the riders, it was an indispensable tool that kept the wheels of communication turning. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some paisas were designed with holes or slots so they could be worn around the neck or attached to the saddle, making sure they were always visible and never lost in the chaos of travel. It's like the Mongol version of a lanyard at a conference, but with a lot more at stake. As you ride on, the paisa's weight is a constant reminder of your responsibility. You're not just delivering messages, you're carrying the Empire's trust, its power, and its lifeline. Without this small tablet, the vast network of the Yam would falter, and the Empire's heartbeat would slow. You're hungry, and the endless galloping has worked up quite an appetite. But on the Mongol postal trail, meals aren't leisurely affairs with silverware and linen napkins. They're quick, practical, and designed to fuel both rider and horse for the next leg. The diet is rugged, simple, and surprisingly effective for the demands of the steppe. Imagine tearing into dried meat-often mutton, or horse-packed tightly to last days without spoiling. It's tough, chewy, and salty, but it's packed with protein and energy. Alongside this, you might sip on airag, the fermented mare's milk that's both nourishing and slightly intoxicating. It's a staple of Mongol life, providing hydration and calories in one go. Sometimes, riders carried small bundles of dried curds or hard cheese, easy to eat on the move. Historians still argue about how varied the riders' diets could be, especially when travelling through different regions with access to local foods. Some accounts suggest that riders occasionally enjoyed fresh fruits or grains when passing through settled areas, but the staple remained the hardy, portable fare suited to the nomadic lifestyle. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly carried a small flask of kumis, fermented mare's milk, not just for nourishment, but also as a mild stimulant, helping them stay alert during those long, sleep-deprived rides. It's like an ancient energy drink, though, with a decidedly acquired taste. Food wasn't just about energy, it was also a morale booster. The simple act of sharing a quick meal at a relay station, swapping stories or jokes, could lift spirits and strengthen bonds among riders and station keepers. Even in the harshest conditions, these moments of camaraderie were vital. So, as you chew on your dried meat and sip your kumis, remember that this humble diet was a key part of the Yam's success. It kept riders fueled, alert, and ready to race across the steppe, carrying the Empire's messages faster than anyone thought possible. You're riding hard, and the weather isn't making it any easier. The Mongolian steppe is a place of extreme zone moment. The sun blazes down mercilessly, turning the grass to brittle gold. The next, icy winds whip across the plains, chilling you to the bone. The weather is a relentless opponent, testing both rider and horse with every mile. Scorching summers bake the earth, making the air shimmer with heat and dust. You squint against the sun, feeling the sweat trickle down your back, and pray your horse's hooves don't kick up too much dust, which could choke both of you. Then there are the brutal winters, when snow blankets the steppe and temperatures plunge well below freezing. The cold bites through your clothing, and frost stiffens your fingers and face. Riding through a blizzard, you cling to the reins, muscles tense, eyes barely open against the stinging wind. Historians still argue about how much the Mongol postal system adapted its routes and schedules to seasonal weather. Some suggest riders slowed down or paused during the harshest conditions, while others believe the urgency of messages forced them to push through regardless, risking frostbite or heat stroke. Here's a quirky tidbit. To protect themselves from the sun, some riders used a mixture of crocodile dung and mud as a crude sunscreen and insect repellent. It sounds gross, but hey, desperate times call for desperate measures, and it probably worked better than you'd expect. The horses, too, had to be tough. They grew thick winter coats and had incredible endurance to survive the cold and heat. Riders learned to read their mounts for signs of fatigue or distress, knowing that a tired horse could mean disaster for both messenger and message. So, as you battle the elements, remember that the Mongol postal riders were not just couriers, they were warriors against nature itself. Their ability to adapt and endure harsh weather was as crucial to the Empire's communication as their speed and skill. You're now getting acquainted with the unsung heroes of the Yam system, the Mongol postal horses. These aren't the massive, sleek steeds you might imagine from medieval jousts. Instead, they're small but incredibly tough horses, bred for stamina and resilience rather than size or flash. Picture a compact, muscular horse with a thick coat that changes with the seasons, perfect for enduring the scorching summers and freezing winters of the steppe. These horses are known for their remarkable endurance. They can cover long distances with minimal rest, survive on sparse forage, and carry their riders swiftly across rough terrain. Their size actually works to their advantage, allowing them to navigate narrow paths and conserve energy. Historians still argue about the exact breeds and lineage of these horses, but it's clear that the Mongol postal horses were a critical factor in the empire's success. Some scholars suggest that the Mongols selectively bred these horses for generations to optimize their speed and durability, while others believe that the natural environment played the biggest role in shaping their traits. Here's a quirky tidbit. Mongol riders often carried multiple horses on their journeys, switching mounts at relay stations to keep each horse fresh. It's like having a pit crew in a Formula One race, but with four-legged athletes instead of tyres and fuel. This practice allowed riders to maintain a blistering pace without overtaxing any single horse. The bond between rider and horse was deep and practical. Riders knew their mounts intimately, understanding their limits and moods, and often treated them better than themselves. After all, a tired or injured horse could mean the difference between life and death on the trail. So, as you settle into the rhythm of your mount's steady gallop, I remember that these small but mighty horses were the backbone of the Yam system silent partners in a communication network that spanned continents and shaped history. You're riding through a landscape that's not just vast, but also rife with dangerous bandits, rival factions, and the ever-present threat of interception. Protecting the messages you carry isn't just about speed, it's about security and secrecy. The Mongol postal riders were entrusted with sensitive information, and their role included safeguarding it from prying eyes and hostile forces. The relay stations themselves were often fortified or guarded by local troops, creating safe havens where riders could exchange messages without fear of ambush. Riders were trained to be vigilant, using coded language or cryptic symbols to prevent interception. The systems designed passing messages quickly from one rider to the next also minimized the risk of any one courier being caught with a full message. Historians still argue about how sophisticated the Mongol encryption methods were. Some believe that the Mongols used simple ciphers or codes, while others suggest that much of the security relied on the speed and secrecy of the relay system itself rather than complex cryptography. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly carried small, sealed containers or scroll cases that were designed to protect messages from weather and tampering. It's like an ancient version of a waterproof envelope, ensuring that the message arrived intact, no matter the journey's hardships. The paisa, that trusty metal tablet, also played a role in security. It granted riders authority and respect, discouraging interference from locals or bandits who might otherwise try to intercept or delay the message. Without it, a rider was vulnerable, traveling through hostile territories with little protection. So, as you imagine yourself clutching a secret message, racing across the steppe under the watchful eye of the Empire, remember that the Mongol postal system was as much about trust and security as it was about speed. Each rider was a guardian of information, a vital link in a chain that kept the Empire's secrets safe and its power intact. You're pushing your horse to its limits, racing against time and terrain, and the stories you've heard about the speed of these riders start to swirl in your mind. Some say the Mongol postal riders could cover over 200 miles in a single day, staggering claim that sounds almost too good to be true. Historians still argue whether this was a consistent reality or more of an exceptional feat reserved for the most urgent messages. The debate centers on the logistics. Could a rider realistically maintain such speeds over the harsh and varied terrain of the steppe? Some scholars point to the relay system's design, with fresh horses and rested riders at each station, as evidence that these distances were achievable. Others caution that factors like weather, terrain, and the physical limits of horse and rider would have made such speeds rare and unsustainable over long periods. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some accounts suggest that riders were pushed so hard that they sometimes resorted to stimulant sherbal concoctions or even mild narcotics to stay awake and alert during these marathon rides. While historians remain skeptical about the prevalence of such practices, it adds a colourful layer to the image of these relentless couriers. Regardless of the exact speeds, it's clear that the Mongol postal system was one of the fastest and most efficient of its time. The relay stations, fresh horses, and trained riders created a network that outpaced many contemporary systems, allowing the empire to react swiftly to military and political developments. So, as you imagine yourself racing across the steppe, fueled by determination and maybe a bit of herbal energy, remember that the legend of the Mongol rider's speed is both a testament to human endurance and a reminder that history often blends fact with a dash of myth. You're beginning to see that the Yam system wasn't just about messages, was a powerful engine-driving trade and cultural exchange across the vast Mongol Empire. As riders zipped across the steppe, they carried not only official orders, but also news, goods and ideas, knitting together diverse peoples and economies. Trade routes flourished under the protection and efficiency of the Yam. Merchants could send word of market conditions, negotiate deals, and coordinate shipments with unprecedented speed. The Silk Road, already an ancient artery of commerce, gained new vitality as the Mongol postal network ensured that information and goods flowed smoothly from East Asia to Europe. Historians still argue about the extent to which the Yam directly influenced the boom in trade. Some credit it as a critical factor in the Pax Mongolicarta period of relative peace and stability that allowed commerce to thrive, while others suggest that economic growth was more complex, involving multiple factors beyond just communication. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly carried small tokens or samples of goods as informal business cards, a primitive but effective way to introduce merchants and products across the empire. Imagine a rider galloping in with a pouch of silk threads or spices, sparking curiosity and trade deals in distant towns. The cultural impact was just as profound. Ideas, technologies, and even religious beliefs travelled along these routes, carried by riders who were unwitting ambassadors of the empire's diversity. The Yam helped create a network where East met West, and cultures mingled in ways that shaped the future of Eurasia. So, as you picture yourself riding through bustling trade hubs and quiet villages alike, remember that the Mongol postal system was more than a courier service. It was a catalyst for connection, commerce, and cultural exchange on a scale never before seen. You're now comparing the Mongol Yam to other great postal systems of history, and it's clear that while the Mongols weren't the first to develop mounted couriers, their system was uniquely adapted to their empire's scale and needs. Think about the Roman cursus publicus or the Persian Shapar Kaneboth, impressive in their own right, but the Mongol Yam took these ideas to a new level. The Roman system relied heavily on well-maintained roads and a network of relay stations, much like the Yam, but it was limited by the empire's geography and slower horses. The Persians had an efficient courier system, with mounted riders and relay stations, which likely influenced the Mongols. However, the Mongol system's emphasis on speed, endurance, and flexibility across vast, often roadless terrain set it apart. Historians still argue about how much the Mongol Yam borrowed from these earlier systems versus how much it was a Mongol innovation. Some suggest that the Mongols adapted and improved upon what they encountered during their conquests, while others see the Yam as a distinctly Mongol creation born from the unique challenges of the steppe. Here's a quirky tidbit. Unlike the Romans, whose couriers often wore official uniforms, Mongol riders were more like nomadic warrior spectacle, rugged and blending seamlessly into the landscape. It's as if the empire's communication relied as much on stealth and survival skills as on formal bureaucracy. So, as you imagine yourself riding alongside couriers from ancient Rome or Persia, remember that the Mongol Yam was a leap forward not just in speed, but in adaptability and endurance, reflecting the empire's unique character and vast ambitions. You're starting to wonder about the social world surrounding these rider show. They were seen by others and how they saw themselves. The Mongol postal riders occupied a unique place in the empire's social hierarchy, straddling the line between elite warriors and essential servants of the state. On one hand, riders were respected for their endurance, skill, and crucial role in maintaining the empire's communication. Their ability to traverse vast distances swiftly made them indispensable, and they often enjoyed privileges like exemption from certain taxes or obligations. The paisa they carried symbolized not just authority, but also trust from the highest levels of government. Historians still argue about whether riders were considered noble warriors or simply functionaries. Some sources depict them as heroic figures, almost legendary in their toughness and dedication, while others suggest they were more like highly trained civil servants, valued but not exalted. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly took great pride in their speed records, competing informally to see who could deliver messages the fastest. Imagine a medieval version of a postal race, complete with bragging rights and maybe a few good-natured jabs. Despite their importance, riders often lived hard lives, constantly on the move and exposed to danger and exhaustion. Their social status was a mix of respect and hardship, a reminder that even the most vital roles in an empire come with sacrifices. So, as you picture yourself among these riders, remember that you're part of a special class, both admired and tested by the demands of the empire, living a life where speed and endurance define your place in history. You're deep in the saddle, miles from anywhere, and the mind starts to wander. In a world full of danger and uncertainty, it's not surprising that Mongol riders, like many travelers through history, developed a range of quirky superstitions and rituals to ensure their safe passage. Imagine a rider tying a small, intricately woven braid of horsehair to their saddle, believing it would ward off evil spirits or bring good luck. Or perhaps they would offer a small pinch of dried meat or a drop of kumis to the sky before setting off, a humble offering to the Tengri, sky god, for protection from storms and bandits. These weren't just random acts. They were deeply ingrained cultural practices, a way to exert some control over an unpredictable world. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were widespread among all riders or more personal individual practices. Some scholars suggest they were remnants of ancient shamanistic beliefs, while others view them as practical psychological tools for dealing with stress and fear. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some riders reportedly carried a small polished stone or a fossilized tooth, believing it had special protective powers. It's like an ancient version of a good luck charm, clutched tightly in a calloused hand before embarking on a perilous journey. These rituals provided comfort and a sense of agency in a life where much was beyond their control. They were a way of connecting with the spiritual forces of the steppe, seeking blessings for their horses, their messages, and their own lives. So, as you imagine yourself performing a small personal ritual before dawn breaks, remember that even the toughest riders relied on a blend of skill, courage, and a little bit of magic to navigate the vast, unpredictable world of the Mongol Empire. You're considering the human landscape of the Mongol Empire, and a natural question arises: what about the women? While the image of the postal rider is predominantly male, the role of women in nomadic societies was often more expansive than in settled civilizations. Historians still debate the extent of female involvement in the male-dominated world of the Yam. While direct accounts of women serving as postal riders are scarce, it's highly probable that women played crucial supporting roles. They managed the domestic affairs of the relay stations, preparing food, tending to the horses, and providing essential logistical support. In a society where everyone contributed to the family's survival, these contributions were far from minor. Some scholars argue that in exceptional circumstances, or in more remote areas, women might have acted as informal couriers, especially for local messages or within their own tribal networks. After all, Mongol women were skilled horsewomen and capable of handling themselves in harsh environments. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some historical records hint at female shamans and tribal leaders who held significant influence, suggesting that women were not entirely excluded from positions of power and responsibility, even if not directly in the official Yam system. It's a bit like finding a hidden track on an album. You know there's more to the story than meets the eye. So, as you ponder the silent contributions, remember that behind every galloping male rider there was likely a vast network of women ensuring the smooth operation of the system, keeping the stations running, and nurturing the culture that made such an empire possible. You're witnessing the gradual fading of the mighty Yam system as the Mongol Empire begins to fragment. The once unified network of relay stations and riders starts to unravel, caught in the tides of political turmoil and shifting power. The empire's splintering into khanates means communication lines become fractured, and the efficiency that once defined the Yam diminishes. As regional rulers assert their independence, the centralized control that maintained the postal system weakens. Some relay stations fall into disrepair, others are commandeered for local use or neglected entirely. The once seamless chain of riders becomes patchy and messages slow to a crawl or get lost altogether. Historians still argue about the exact timeline and causes of the Yam's decline. Some emphasize internal political strife and the loss of centralized authority, while others point to external pressures like invasions, economic shifts, and changes in trade routes. It's likely a combination of factors that led to the system's gradual disappearance. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some regions, former Yam stations were repurposed as inns or trading posts, their original function forgotten, but their strategic locations still valued. It's as if the ghosts of riders past lingered in the walls, whispering tales of speed and endurance to travellers who no longer understood their significance. Despite its decline, the legacy of the Yam lived on, influencing later postal and communication systems. But for the riders and stations of the original network, the end marked the close of an era where human and horse united to bridge an empire's vastness with remarkable speed. You're now reflecting on the lasting legacy of the Mongol Yam system and how its innovations rippled through history long after the empire's fall. The Yam set a new standard for communication networks, inspiring future empires and states to develop their own postal systems modelled on its principles of speed, reliability, and extensive relay stations. In the centuries that followed, various Eurasian powers adapted elements of the Yam. The Russian Tsardom, for example, incorporated relay stations and mounted couriers into its expanding postal network, a direct inheritance from the Mongol administration during the period of Mongol dominance known as the Mongol yoke. Similarly, the Ottoman Empire, and later the Qing dynasty, developed sophisticated courier systems that echoed the Mongol emphasis on rapid, long-distance communication. Historians continue to debate the degree to which the Mongol postal system influenced the development of modern postal services. Some argue that the Yam's model was foundational, laying the groundwork for the concept of state-run, organized communication networks. Others see it as one of many parallel developments in the evolution of postal systems worldwide. Here's a quirky tidbit. The word yam itself has survived in various languages as a term related to mail or postal services, a linguistic echo of the Mongol Empire's far-reaching influence. It's like a whisper from the past, carried on the winds of history. As you close this journey, remember that the Mongol Yam was more than just a courier network. It was a revolutionary system that connected continents, enabled empires, and shaped the flow of information in ways that still resonate today.